Adventure Stories. Приключенческие рассказы.
On a bright May evening, Holmes and I were discussing our plans for fishing with Mr. Barnes, the innkeeper. "What about the Hull Lake?" asked Holmes. "Are there many fish in it?" "Don't fish there, sir," answered the innkeeper. "You may find yourself in the lake before you have finished." "How is that?" "It's Sir Robert, sir. He doesn't want any strangers to come near his park. Sir Robert is the sort that strikes first and speaks afterwards. Keep away from the park." "Of course, Mr. Barnes," said Holmes. "We certainly shall. By the way, you have a beautiful spaniel here. We saw it in the hall. You are quite right, sir. There aren't any better in England. It was Sir Robert himself who gave it to me. I have to keep it on a lead. It would run back to Shoscombe if I let it run about." "We are getting some information, Watson," said Holmes when the innkeeper had left us. "By the way, Sir Robert is still in London, I hear. Let's go to Shoscombe and try to get some more information there." "Have you any theory, Holmes?" I asked him. "Only this, Watson, that something happened a week or so ago which has changed the life at Shoscombe Old Place." "What is that something?" "Let's consider the facts. The brother no longer visits his dear invalid sister. He gives away her favorite dog." "Her dog, Watson?" "The lady keeps her room. She has lost interest in the horses and never goes to the stable any longer. She also drinks like a fish now." "How will you explain the crypt?" "Now let's consider the facts about Sir Robert himself," went on Holmes without answering my question. "He is mad keen upon winning the Derby. He is in the hands of the moneylanders. At any moment his horses and his racing stables may be seized by his creditors. He is a very brave man. He lives on his sister's money." "And how will you explain the crypt?" "Ah, yes, the crypt. Let us suppose, Watson, it's only a hypothesis, that Sir Robert has killed his sister." "My dear Holmes, it is out of the question," I cried. "Very possible, Watson," he said. "But I think that we may try a small experiment tomorrow, in order to throw light on the matter. And now let's go to bed and have some rest." About 11 o'clock in the morning we started for a walk and took the black spaniel with us. When we came to the gates of Shoscombe Park, Sherlock Holmes said, "Let's wait here. Mr. Barnes tells me that Lady Beatrice takes a drive at this time of day. When her carriage comes to the gates, it must go slowly while the gates are being opened. When it comes through them, I want you, Watson, to stop the driver with some question, and I shall stand behind this bush and see what I can see." We did not wait long. In a quarter of an hour we saw a big open carriage coming through the park to the gates. Holmes hid himself behind his bush with the dog. While a servant was opening the gates, I was able to get a good look at the people in the carriage. A young woman with red cheeks and light hair sat on the right. At her left was an old woman. Her face and shoulders were wrapped in a shawl. I held up my hand and asked the driver if Sir Robert was at Shoscombe Old Place. At the same moment Holmes rose and let the spaniel out of his hands. With joyous cry, the dog ran forward to the carriage and jumped up on the step. Then, in a moment, its joy changed to rage, and it bit at the black skirt of the invalid. "Drive on! Drive on!" cried the old woman. The driver whipped up the horses, and we were left standing in the roadway. "The spaniel thought it was his mistress," said Holmes, "and he found it was a stranger. Dogs don't make mistakes." "But it was the voice of a man," I cried. "Exactly," said Holmes. "It was the voice of a man." Holmes had nothing further to do that day, so we went fishing and had fish for our supper. After supper we went out for a walk once more. We went along the same road as in the morning, and we came to the park gates again. A tall, dark figure was awaiting us there. It was our London visitor, Mr. Mason, the trainer. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said. "I got your note, Mr. Holmes. Sir Robert has not returned yet, but I hear that he is expected tonight." "How far is this crypt from the house?" asked Holmes. "A good quarter of a mile." "You can show us the crypt, Mr. Mason, and then leave us," said Holmes. At first we could see nothing in the darkness when we came to the melancholy place. Then Holmes lit his lantern, which threw its yellow light upon stone walls and stone coffins. "You spoke of some bones, Mr. Mason," said Holmes. "Could you show them before you go?" "They are here in the corner." The trainer walked across the crypt and then stood in silent surprise. "They are gone," he said. "So I expected," said Holmes. "They were taken away and burned in the furnace." "But who could want to burn the bones of a man who has been dead 1,000 years?" asked John Mason. "That's what we are here to find out," said Holmes. When John Mason left us, Holmes set to work. He made a very careful examination of the coffins. An hour or more passed before Holmes came to a coffin standing beside the entrance to the crypt. With his lens he carefully examined the heavy lid of the coffin. He seemed to be satisfied with his results. Suddenly he stopped working and listened. Someone was walking in the church above. Then a light came down the stairs, and a few seconds later a man came in. A large stable lantern, which he held in front of him, shone upwards on his strong face and angry eyes. He stared at my companion and myself. "Who the devil are you?" he thundered. "And what are you doing here?" Then, as Holmes did not answer, he took a few steps forward and raised a heavy stick which he carried. "Do you hear me?" he cried. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Holmes was not frightened. He stepped forward to meet him. "I also have a question to ask you, Sir Robert," he said very seriously. "Who is this, and why is it here?" He turned and opened the coffin lid behind him. In the light of the lantern I saw a body wrapped in a sheet from head to foot. I also saw a yellow face, all nose and chin. Sir Robert gave a cry and stepped back. "How did you come to know of this?" he cried. And then his courage returned to him, and he said, "What business is it of yours?" "My name is Sherlock Holmes," said my companion. Possibly you have heard of me. In any case, my business is to support the law. It seems to me you have much to answer for." Sir Robert stared angrily for a moment, but Holmes' quiet voice and calm manner had their effect. "Believe me, Mr. Holmes," he said, "I could do nothing else, but I have not done anything criminal." "I should be happy to think so," said Holmes, "but I fear your explanations must be before the police." "Well, if it must be, it must," said Sir Robert. "Come to the house, and you can judge for yourself how the matter stands." A quarter of an hour later we found ourselves in one of the rooms of the old house. Here Sir Robert left us for a few moments. When he returned, he had two companions with him. One of them was the young woman whom we had seen in the carriage. The other was a small man with a face like a rat. They looked surprised, which showed that Sir Robert had not yet had time to explain to them what had happened. "There," said Sir Robert, pointing to them with his hand, "are Mr. and Mrs. Norlett. Mrs. Norlett has been my sister's maid for 5 years. I have brought them here because I want to explain the true position to you, and they are the only two people upon earth who can support what I say." "Is this necessary, Sir Robert?" cried the woman. "Have you thought what you are doing?" "I know what I am doing," said Sir Robert. "Now, Mr. Holmes, listen to the facts. You know so much that I think you know I am going to run a young horse at the Derby, and everything depends upon my success. If I win, I am saved. If I lose, well, I do not dare to think of that." "I understand the position," said Holmes. "I depend upon my sister, Lady Beatrice, for everything," Sir Robert went on. "That is well known. It is also well known that when she dies, the place will go to her late husband's brother. Now, I am deeply in the hands of the money-lenders. I have always known that if my sister died, my creditors would be here immediately. They know that no one will keep me with money after her death. Everything would be seized, my stables, my horses, everything. And my worst creditor is my worst enemy, Sam Brewer, whom I had to horsewhip once. Well, Mr. Holmes, my sister did die just a week ago." "And you told no one?" "What could I do? If I did, I should be a ruined man. And the race was to take place in 3 weeks. So I decided to conceal my sister's death for the next 3 weeks. It came into my head that her maid's husband, this man here, is an actor and could play the role of my sister for that period. He had only to appear daily in the carriage, and for the rest of the day he could stay in my sister's room and drink wine that his wife brought him. No one need enter it except the maid." "Go on, Sir Robert," said Holmes. "What did you do?" "The body could not remain there. Norlett and I carried it to the old crypt, but we were followed by my sister's spaniel. After that, the dog remained at the door of the church and howled all the time, so I got rid of the spaniel. I don't think, Mr. Holmes, that I have done anything wrong." "I don't think it was very noble to do what you did," said Holmes. Sir Robert shook his head immediately. "I am sure," he said, "you would have felt differently if you had been in my position. I don't think that I have wronged the dead. We put her in one of the coffins of her husband's ancestors, but we could not leave the bones on the floor of the crypt. Knowlet and I brought them to the central furnace of the house and burned them there. There is my story, Mr. Holmes." "Well, Sir Robert," said Holmes, rising, "this matter must of course be brought before the police. It was my duty to bring the facts to light, and there I must leave it. It is nearly midnight, Watson, and I think we may make our way back to the Green Dragon." It is now known that this episode ended for Sir Robert more happily than he deserved. The police were kind to him, and kept his secret until the race was over. Shoscombe Prince won the Derby. His owner got £80,000 and paid his creditors in full. But still there was enough money left to last Sir Robert Norbiton to the end of his life.